with NPR Illinois. Joining us this week are Dave McKinney with Chicago Public Radio station WBEZ. Welcome, Dave.
Hannah, how are you?
Also here is Jason Piscia, Director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at the University of Illinois, Springfield. Glad you're here, Jason.
Great to be here, Hannah.
Well, this is a week where we may look back in several months as an inflection point in Illinois' approach to the pandemic. We had a major ruling on masks in schools, and then Governor J.B. Pritzker announced his intention to roll back Illinois' broader mask mandate for public indoor spaces. Now, that won't go into effect until the 28th of February, a little more than 2 weeks from when this program will air. But tell us about the factors that went into this decision, Dave.
Well, I mean, the main issue, I think, are the rate of hospitalizations. I mean, it's pretty clear that the state, like the rest of the country, is on the downhill slide of the Omicron surge. The rate of hospitalization since I think the high point in the second week of January has fallen by more than 60%, and so that really became kind of the basis for Pritzker in listening to the public health director and other epidemiologists to say some of these places where people have been having to mask up, that can be relaxed. I mean, it's not a universal mask mandate, of course. I mean, this is just going to cover places like restaurants, bars, museums, places that are not covered. As you mentioned, schools are not. But if you're traveling someplace out of state, I mean, O'Hare Airport and Midway Airport are not covered because they're federal spaces. Mass transit is not covered. And of course, healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, you're still going to have to mask up there. But this was a situation where lots of other states, Democratic-led states, had begun doing that. New Jersey, California, New York, to name a few. And I think really Illinois and Governor Pritzker, really were kind of in a spot where something needed to be done because the numbers were justifying it, and politically there was increasing pressure to do something.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen both a tumble in the Omicron surge. It's been pretty remarkable, but that's what happens when you shoot straight up, and you're gonna have to shoot straight down. But Jason, like Dave mentioned, there's been a pretty drastic shift in public opinion, especially in the last few months. We are now past our fifth wave of COVID in Illinois. I think in other states they might have had a sixth wave. But tell us about just the shift in public opinion. People are just kind of fed up, huh?
Yeah, I mean, even Governor Pritzker in his news conference this week, announcing the end of the mask mandate later this month, acknowledge what we already know, which is we're all tired of wearing masks. And if depending on where you are in your part of the state, you see it. I mean, during the height of it, when we were all going to Walmart or the grocery store, a lot of people wore masks. I think when those mandates were relaxed in the summertime very briefly, a lot of people just didn't pick it up again when it got put back into place at the end of the summer. Team that with the availability of vaccines. I think at this point, a lot of people who want vaccines have gotten them or are in the process of getting through their battery of vaccines, and those that don't want them probably aren't going to get them. So we've all sort of been set in our ways with that as well. So with all those factors in place, I think we've come to a point to where we're beginning to realize that how we're living with COVID now is probably how we're going to be living with COVID for the foreseeable future, if not, beyond. It was talked about how we need to learn to coexist with COVID. And I think people have sort of put their stake in the ground on how they will coexist with COVID. And that's where we stand today.
Jason, I mean, we've all seen these dozens of think pieces that have been written over the last several months, especially about how families with young kids under 5 who can't get vaccinated yet, they feel left behind, they feel forgotten. Do you think that, the governor's decision will, probably sort of small backlash from that community, given that vaccines are still not available, even though, they might be on the horizon in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I'd agree. I even saw some of it this week. If you just pay attention to, and I don't know if we're ready to segue into the talk about, the schools and everything with the mask mandates with that and the lawsuit, but many schools have relaxed their masking policies in light of the court decision that happened last week. And a lot of people obviously professing glee over this, who were eager to get the masks off their kids. But there are those who are younger who haven't gotten a chance to get those vaccines yet, or aren't eligible for them yet because they're under the age of 5, who are still worried about it. Sending those under 5 kids to school, and then they're sitting in school for all those hours per day, 5 days a week, and then coming home to possibly immunocompromised parents or grandparents, or in passing around the virus that way. So yes, I do feel there is some left behind feelings there. It'll be interesting to see how the politicians and those making these policies will sort of react to that, or accommodate those concerns. There is, no one wants to go back to remote school, and I know there are a few school districts around the state who temporarily went back to remote school this week to deal with, as while we wait for the masking issue within schools to get sorted out.
Right. Well, we'll talk about the legal ruling in just a second. But Dave, I do want to ask you, if we rewind back to July when Governor Pritzker officially announced his reelection campaign, he had staked it on this, mission accomplished. Look at how we handled COVID. We handled COVID better than a lot of other, especially Midwestern states. Do you think the governor is eager to pivot back to that messaging and, just get beyond COVID in general to talk about, his other proclaimed progressive victories over the last 3 years?
Well, I think it's hard to sort of rally around that message when the problem hasn't gone away, and that's just the reality of it. And on top of that, when you see kind of the broad impact of inflation and the economy it's having on people, it's almost sort of like this double-edged kind of thing that's hitting people now. The pandemic. I think there is some relief in the pandemic that people aren't generally getting as sick and dying at such high rates as our earlier surges, but the economy is the real thing. So I to what extent he's eager to go back to that, I don't know. I mean, there's one data point that I have kind of been paying attention to over the last year and a half, or really since the start of the pandemic. There's this thing called the COVID States Project, and it's a consortium created by Harvard, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Northeastern University in Boston, and they do public opinion polling on, basically different aspects of the pandemic. And one of their questions every time they do these polls relates to how your governor in your respective states is doing handling the pandemic. And they just posted numbers for the month of January that I pulled up the other day, and it's one poll, but Pritzker's numbers in January showed that 39% of Illinoisans approved of his handling of the pandemic. And, that by far is the lowest of the pandemic in their polling. And, again, if it's just not, if it's a one-off, fine, but if there is polling that's also showing this is starting to have an impact on him, I think, that could explain, that could be kind of an underpinning of some of their decision making, because this is an issue now that, unlike back in July, perhaps when it was mission accomplished, like you said, this is an issue now that probably is beginning to hurt, public officials who are trying to manage things.
Yeah. You can see the stress, in a lot of areas, but I think this is a governor who has definitely paid attention to polling, at certain times, gone away from what, maybe the majority has wanted, but drilled down into, what he knows his base of voters would want. But yeah,
well, and Hannah, another point real quickly before we move on, as divisive as things sort of seem to be in the Republican gubernatorial field, this issue of masks is something that just sort of galvanizes Republican voters. And if these numbers in this polling are right, it seems like there's some Democrats and independents who are kind of starting to begin to swing that direction about, let's get this thing behind us. So it's a potent issue. It could be hurting him, and it's a rallying point for Republicans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see that in the messaging this week from the governor's Republican opponents, even after he announced on Wednesday that he would be lifting the statewide mask mandate. It wasn't far enough because it doesn't apply to kids in schools, which leads us to this discussion about late Friday night. Judge Raylene Grishow in Springfield issued a temporary restraining order that she thinks should void the mask mandate for schools and the requirement that teachers and other school staff get vaccinated or alternatively test regularly. So Jason, tell us a little bit about this restraining order, the background of this lawsuit, and what, who does it apply to? Because that seems to be still very confusing.
Yeah, even, several days into this, since that ruling came down last week last Friday, a lot of schools still wondering what the legal ramifications are. In a nutshell, there were 145 schools who were sued as part of this lawsuit, and saying that the governor didn't have the authorization to, and the school district don't have the authorization to force their kids to wear masks. Circuit Judge Raylene Grishow from Sangamon County, right here in Springfield, issued that ruling that said the mask mandate is null and void, and that those school districts are free to sort of make their own release their students from that mask mandate. And that sort of set off a wave of confusion over last weekend. Depending on where you were throughout the state, there were school boards that held emergency meetings on Saturday and Sunday and were issuing rulings. I know I got an email from the superintendent of my school on Sunday night, indicating that they were going to still highly recommend masks, but not force kids to wear them. And that's the way it was going to be starting Monday morning. So we had to have a talk with the kids after they woke up on Monday morning to say, here's some of your friends might not be wearing masks, but some of them might be, and we'd like you to wear masks. But it was hard for them to understand that some people have to follow rules and some people don't. But it's a good conversation to have. So, and again, some school districts went with, if they were part of the 145 schools, they definitely didn't have to. Other school districts felt that, they could be legally liable still, even though they weren't specifically named in the lawsuit. So they went ahead and made masks optional as well. Others thought that they were still had that power to put those rules in place. So they did, including the Chicago Public Schools. So we're waiting for, the governor's office immediately appealed. The attorney general's office immediately appealed, and we're waiting for that appeal to go through. We expect it in the next week or so. And we'll see what happens from there. It's been a confusing time, and it might all get switched again, depending on how this appeal comes out.
Right. But Dave, we've been waiting for this ruling for, a few weeks now, since arguments happened earlier in January. And, like Jason mentioned, the appeal was almost immediate. There was a notice of appeal, Monday morning. Even before then, there was a request from the circuit court to, issue a stay on the TRO, which didn't happen, which I think, caused a lot of confusion on Monday morning when schools were kind of caught, without a plan. But was the governor caught flat-footed? Why was there no plan? It was very disruptive, especially in several districts who decided, among the confusion, to just cancel in-person classes on Monday.
Well, I mean, there's always unpredictability in how a court case is going to go. I don't know. This is a very strange kind of set of circumstances confronting Pritzker right now, because as we were talking about in the opening segment here, there seems to be this movement to ease up on our masking restrictions across the board. And even he said that, once the end of the month rolls around, a few more weeks, we might see the same thing happening in schools. So on one hand, you have the governor acknowledging that the time is coming to an end on the school masking mandates. But at the same time, he has this really kind of terrible ruling that weakens his authority and really any kind of future governor's authority when it comes to dealing with public health crises. And so I think that's really kind of the justification for the appeal here. I mean, again, could they have had a plan in place to, in case things went south in a hurry, as they did over the weekend, to help school districts kind of understand? I mean, I suppose the State Board of Education could have been a little more aggressive in its messaging to people to make clear what to do. But even the governor and attorney general's office over the weekend weren't entirely clear if they were going to be, if the circuit judge was going to make her ruling on staying her temporary restraining order, which, I mean, that was unlikely in the first place. But, really the question of whether or not they could get an appeal drawn up and, quickly and sent to the fourth appellate district and get some kind of relief immediately. I think there was just a lot of confusion on all around here. So I don't know. I think, they still are proceeding with this legal fight in spite of the mask mandates seeming to be kind of running out of steam.
Yeah, I mean, the governor did say earlier this week that he wanted, he wouldn't abide by, the judge taking away his authority to reinstate a mask mandate if, God forbid, there is another variant that causes yet another surge. But I think it's really interesting. The legal underpinnings of this ruling is that under state law, only the Illinois Department of Public Health and local health departments can put people into quarantine. The State Board of Education cannot do so. But this ruling treats masks and close contact quarantine. We didn't mention that earlier, and mandatory vaccines or testing protocols for school staff as a form of quarantine, which I think some people would say, yeah, of course, this is, surely the folks who filed the lawsuit, Tom DeVore, has become very famous on his very, interesting interpretations of the law. But also, I think some people would say a form of quarantine. Masks are a form of quarantine. This is actually, this is to avoid quarantine, to avoid infection. But, the longer this goes on, regardless of how, the appeal turns out, it's kind of you can't put toothpaste back in the tube, because even on that first day, anecdotally, my teacher friend said that, beginning of the day, maybe they had, 70, 80% of their kids masking. By the end of the day, just that first day on Monday, maybe 30, 20%. And, that's a matter of culture. And you have some schools treating the ruling as, well, we're only going to apply it to the kids who were specifically named in the lawsuit, if they had some of those. As Jason said, some of them are just threw up their hands. Maybe they got legal counsel from their, attorneys on call who said, you better not mess with this. You don't want to be legally liable. So you better just say mask optional. But it's going to be very interesting going forward, because now the governor has, he's kind of modified his message on masks as, well, we want to have the option, even though, of course, we want to see masks go away.
The mechanics of an appeal are interesting too, because you have to almost sort of have this masking mandate still in place in order to go in front of a judicial panel or the state Supreme Court asking for relief from the Sangamon County judge's ruling. I mean, if there is no mask mandate in schools, I would imagine just about any court is going to say, well, all right, what are you here for? Why do you need relief from something if there's not, if there's not masks in the schools anymore? So, it's a strange confluence of events here that I think it's creating a major challenge and headache for all the lawyers that are involved on the state side with the governor and attorney general.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
definitely a good point. Oh,
not
go
to
ahead.
mention not to mention the politicians either. We talked about, Pritzker possibly being flat-footed when this came out a week ago. You know, the governor and his people have some time now to sort of prepare for scenario A or scenario B, whatever comes out of this appeal. And you have to wonder if, how hard they're working at this point to come up with some sort of a response or a more orderly response to whatever happens with the appeal. Uh, the confusion and the frustration that we were all feeling last weekend can be somehow limited after this new decision comes out.
Sure. Well, with 5 minutes left, I'd like to pivot to campaign time. But the governor has, just like every governor, after they give a budget address, they usually do a mini tour of the things that they're proposing to, kind of build support. Definitely, get some headlines out of it. Dave, the governor is going around and touting his, 1%. His 1 year freeze on the 1% grocery and drug tax, gas tax, 1 year freeze, other things like that. I mean, how is this being received locally?
Well, I think that there needs to be some serious money put behind this before it really kind of reaches the masses. I don't think that, I know he's delivered a budget address. I know he's made appearances in the collar counties and in Springfield and Bloomington, touting this nearly $1 billion in tax relief he's targeting. I mean, the challenge kind of in the messaging of it is like, all right, this is meant as a response to inflation. I mean, they've said as much, but at the same time, we're talking about really a pretty kind of minuscule offering to people where I don't know that, if you're going into the grocery store and buying $200 worth of groceries for your family, this is going to be a $2 savings that you'll see, maybe, and you won't even probably know that you got that savings. So that's sort of the trick in the messaging to make clear that, that they want to do this. There's also a bit of there is pushback on the gas piece of this. And it's, to me, it's sort of unclear what the status of that is going to be. If they're going to be enough, if there's going to be enough legislative support to get that part through. I mean, the road construction industry and the operating engineers local 150 have both, they're opposed to taking this tax off on fuel because it's used for bridge repairs and road construction. I mean, it's about $135 million, I think, that would be taken away. And so they're putting out word among to anyone who will listen to them that they're against it. And so I think they've got clout. Local 150 has clout in the General Assembly, and so it'll be an interesting thing to see if that survives.
It's almost an understatement. Local 150 is just very powerful. But Jason, the other part that the governor had proposed, but I don't think he's done any sort of big event on it yet, is the idea that for a year, you'd be able to double your kind of property tax rebate applicable to maybe about 2 million homeowners. If you file jointly, earning up to $500,000, single, obviously half of that. But I mean, is that going to make much of a difference? Obviously, property taxes in Illinois have been a huge issue for years and years and years.
Yeah, I am surprised that, and maybe it's part of the messaging plan over the next few weeks as he's trying to get his budget passed. But, I think when it comes to the reasons why people are dissatisfied with living in Illinois, I don't think the 1% grocery tax came to the top of many people's lists, but property taxes do. For people who pay property taxes that keep going up and up and up, I think there is some, political points to be made by somehow playing it up. But as you pointed out, just in your description of it, it's a little convoluted, a little bit complex to explain in a quick TV commercial or a news conference to try to make it clear on how much the savings are going to be. And the savings aren't as widespread as they would be for a gas tax or a grocery tax. So it'll be interesting to see if how he sort of forms that message and passes it along, because it does mean big bucks, and it is a high profile issue dealing with property taxes.
Yeah. And at the same time, this takes about $1 billion, to offer these 3 forms of relief and some other forms of relief, which we didn't discuss, fee relief for those wanting to enter the medical field and for, struggling restaurants and bars. But you have progressive interests who are, J.B. Pritzker's allies who are asking for more money to put in a lot of other things. But we are out of time for this week. I'd like to thank my guests, Jason Piscia, Dave McKinney. I'm Hannah Meisel. We'll catch you again next week on Capitol View.